The Last Order. In a quiet town nestled between the mountains, there was a small family-run restaurant called the Golden Spoon. Known for its exquisite food and cozy ambiance, the restaurant had been a local favorite for decades. However, few knew the dark secret hidden within its walls. The story begins on a stormy winter night. Emma, a culinary student, had recently been hired to work as a server at the Golden Spoon. She was excited but also nervous. Her first shift was during the restaurant's late-night hours, which were infamous among the staff. The owner, Mr. Bennett, had strict rules for the night shift. Never go into the basement, never question strange orders, and always leave by midnight. The last rule was non-negotiable. As the clock struck 10 p.m., the first peculiar customer arrived. A man dressed in a tattered coat, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. He didn't speak, simply slid a note across the counter. The note read, "Table 13, no questions." Emma felt a chill but obeyed, bringing him a plate of food prepared by the chef, who also seemed uneasy. When Emma returned to the table, the man was gone, leaving only a strange symbol carved into the wood. The chef muttered, "It's starting again," and refused to elaborate. By 11 p.m., the storm outside intensified, and the power flickered. The restaurant grew eerily silent. Emma noticed that the other customers were gone, even though she hadn't seen anyone leave. Then came another note, slid under the kitchen door. "The basement. Bring the key." The Last Order. Part 2. Emma hesitated, staring at the note. Her heart raced. The basement key hung on a hook in the kitchen, but Mr. Bennett's rule echoed in her mind. Never go into the basement. "Who left this?" she asked the chef, her voice trembling. He shook his head, visibly shaken. "Ignore it. Pretend you didn't see it. We don't mess with the basement." But Emma's curiosity burned. The restaurant seemed different tonight, as if the walls themselves were alive, pulsing with unseen energy. She glanced at the clock. 11:15 p.m. Against her better judgment, she grabbed the key. The basement door was hidden behind the pantry, a heavy wooden barrier that seemed unnaturally cold to the touch. As she unlocked it, the hinges creaked, and a faint, metallic smell wafted up from the darkness below. "Emma, don't," the chef called out, but his warning came too late. She descended the stairs, flashlight in hand, the beam cutting through the thick, oppressive air. The basement was larger than she expected, with shelves of dusty jars and crates stacked high. At the far end, she noticed a door slightly ajar, faint light spilling out. As she approached, the air grew colder. Pushing the door open, she found a room that didn't belong, a pristine dining area with a single table set for one. The silverware gleamed, and a steaming dish sat on the table. On the plate was a meal Emma recognized, the restaurant's signature dish. But it wasn't on tonight's menu. Suddenly a voice spoke from behind her, low and gravelly. "You shouldn't have come here." She spun around to see the man from earlier, the one with the wide-brimmed hat. Only now his face was visible. His hollow eyes glowed faintly, and his skin was pale and stretched tightly over his skull. "What is this place?" Emma stammered. "This is where the truth lies," he said. "The Golden Spoon was built on a bargain, a deal that requires payment every decade. Tonight, you've unlocked what should have stayed buried." Before Emma could respond, the man raised his hand, and the walls began to ripple, as if alive. The jars on the shelves shattered, releasing shadowy figures that whispered incoherently. The whispers grew louder, drowning out Emma's screams. The Last Order. Part 3. Emma stumbled back, her flashlight flickering as the shadows coalesced into humanoid forms. Their faces were indistinct, yet their presence was suffocating. She could feel their icy whispers brushing against her ears, though their words were incomprehensible. The man in the wide-brimmed hat stepped closer, his skeletal hand reaching for her. "You've disturbed the balance," he said, his voice a haunting echo. "Now you must pay the price." Emma's instincts kicked in. She turned and bolted up the stairs, slamming the basement door shut behind her. The chef was waiting at the top, his face pale with terror. "What did you do?" he shouted. "You shouldn't have gone down there." Before Emma could respond, the entire restaurant began to tremble. Plates and glasses shattered, and the lights flickered violently. A deep, guttural growl resonated through the building, shaking the walls. "The restaurant, it's rejecting us," the chef whispered, his voice barely audible. Suddenly, the shadows from the basement began seeping through the cracks in the door, spilling into the dining area. They moved with purpose, twisting and writhing as they reached for Emma and the chef. "We have to get out of here," Emma yelled, pulling the chef toward the front door. But as they reached it, they found the exit blocked by an invisible force. The shadows surged forward, surrounding them. Emma clutched the basement key tightly in her hand, its cold metal biting into her palm. "What does it want?" she screamed at the chef. He hesitated, then blurted out, "The deal. It's the deal." The owner made it decades ago. The restaurant thrives, but every 10 years, a sacrifice is required. Emma's blood ran cold. A sacrifice. Before he could answer, the shadows grabbed the chef, pulling him into their swirling darkness. His screams echoed through the restaurant, then abruptly stopped. Emma was alone now. The shadows paused, as if waiting for her to make a move. In a desperate bid for survival, she remembered the man's words. "The truth lies here." Clutching the key, she ran back to the basement door. If the answers were there, she had no choice but to face them. The shadows didn't stop her this time. They followed her, as if escorting her to her fate. The Last Order, Part 4. Emma's legs trembled as she descended the basement stairs once more, the shadows trailing her like silent spectators. The strange dining room was still there, untouched by the chaos upstairs. The steaming plate of food sat waiting at the center of the table, and now a small, leather-bound book rested beside it. She approached cautiously, her fingers trembling as she picked up the book. Its cover was embossed with an intricate sigil that matched the carving on table 13. Opening it, she found pages filled with handwritten entries in an archaic script. Flipping through, Emma pieced together the story. Decades ago, Mr. Bennett's grandfather had made a pact with an unknown entity. The deal was simple: unparalleled success for the restaurant in exchange for a life every 10 years. The victims were chosen by the shadows, bound to the sigil that marked them as offerings. Emma's heart sank as she turned to the final page. Her own name was scrawled there, written in fresh black ink. "No," she whispered, stepping back from the table. The shadows moved closer, encircling her. The man in the wide-brimmed hat materialized again, his hollow eyes locking onto hers. "You are the last course," he said, his voice dripping with finality. "Accept your fate, and the restaurant will remain safe. Resist, and the curse will consume everyone tied to this place." Emma's mind raced. She couldn't let herself be another victim, but she also couldn't doom the innocent lives that depended on the golden spoon. Desperation fueled her as she looked around the room for anything that might help. Her eyes fell on the plate of food, the signature dish, the very meal that symbolized the restaurant's success. "What if I destroy this?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "What happens if I break the deal?" The man tilted his head, amused. You would undo decades of prosperity, but the shadows do not forgive easily. They will demand retribution. Emma didn't care. If this place thrived on bloodshed, it wasn't worth saving. Grabbing the plate, she hurled it to the ground. The porcelain shattered, and the room shook violently. The shadows shrieked, their forms writhing as if in agony. The man's face contorted with rage. "You foolish girl, you've undone everything." The light in the room flickered and died, plunging Emma into darkness. She braced herself for the end, but instead the shadows began to retreat, drawn back into the cracks of the walls. The oppressive energy lifted, replaced by an eerie silence. When Emma opened her eyes, she was back in the restaurant's main dining area. The chef was gone, the shadows were gone, and the storm outside had subsided. The clock struck midnight. The golden spoon looked different now, worn and aged, as if decades of glamour had been stripped away in an instant. The curse was broken, but at a cost. Emma walked out into the cold night air, vowing never to return. Behind her, the golden spoon stood dark and empty, its doors swinging gently in the wind. The Last Order. Part 5. Days passed, and Emma tried to return to normal life. But the golden spoon haunted her thoughts. The memory of the shadows, the strange man, and the sacrifice lingered in her dreams, twisting them into nightmares. She couldn't shake the feeling that the curse wasn't entirely gone. One evening, as she sat in her tiny apartment, the TV flickered on by itself. Static filled the screen before an image appeared. The golden spoon, illuminated as though it were still open for business. Emma's heart raced. The scene on the screen shifted. The dining room was full of people, but something was wrong. Their movements were stiff, mechanical, and their faces were pale, their eyes hollow. At the center of the room stood the man in the wide-brimmed hat, smiling at the camera as if he could see Emma. She grabbed the remote and turned off the TV. But the image remained. Then the man spoke, his voice echoing through the room. "You thought it was over?" he said, his grin widening. "You broke the deal, but the shadows still hunger. They've chosen a new feast, Emma. You can't run from this." The screen went dark, and Emma's apartment fell silent. She felt a cold breeze, though all the windows were shut. Turning slowly, she saw a figure standing in the corner of her living room, a shadowy silhouette with glowing eyes. "No," she whispered, backing away. The figure moved closer, and Emma realized it wasn't alone. More shadows seeped through the walls, surrounding her. The sigil from the restaurant appeared on her floor, glowing faintly. Emma screamed, grabbing a kitchen knife from the counter. She slashed at the shadows, but her blade passed through them like air. The shadows whispered in unison, their voices cold and hollow. "You broke the balance. Now you are ours." The sigil beneath her feet began to glow brighter, pulling her down. She clawed at the floor, but the pull was too strong. As the shadows enveloped her, the last thing she saw was the man in the wide-brimmed hat, tipping his hat with a smirk. Months later, the golden spoon reopened under new ownership. Locals were surprised. It had been closed for years, abandoned and decaying, but now it was restored, more glamorous than ever. The first customers noticed a new item on the menu, Emma's special. The waitstaff wouldn't say what it was, but everyone who ordered it swore they heard faint whispers as they ate, and some claimed to see shadows dancing along the walls. The golden spoon's legacy continued, its dark secret buried once more, waiting for the next curious soul to unlock it.